Hi, I'm Karthik Ramakrishnan, Executive Director of California 100, a statewide initiative launched at the University of California and Stanford focused on inspiring a vision and strategy for our next century. A strategy that is innovative, sustainable, and equitable. That's why we're here today, to share with you our strategy or our roadmap for the state's future. But before we get into where we're headed, let's take a look back at where we've been. We launched California 100 in 2021, announcing our research partners, our commission, and our various streams of work. We worked with over 20 research partners throughout California to produce original policy and future scenario reports. We challenged researchers to think about long-term fixes to our biggest problems. We also worked with city, county, and state partners to learn how interventions can help improve how we innovate on these policy solutions. We also benefited from an incredible intergenerational commission, as well as various other stakeholders in our work, including young people, to challenge us to think bigger, better, and bolder. Importantly, we took all of these learnings and we asked Californians directly what they thought about transformative policy solutions for our state's future. Our California Considers poll is a fascinating snapshot on what our residents think. So our final roadmap has 4 essential components, and we begin with core values. Core values are so important, especially in periods of deep uncertainty and rapid change. It can cause a sense of disorientation and confusion, rendering us unsure of what to do. Core values have the ability to ground us during these periods of turmoil and can help guide us in our journey to build better systems. The core values that we elevate are innovation, resilience, inclusion, sustainability, and equity. But we don't stop there. Core values are important, but we need to build on that foundation. So the next stage is visioning. Our vision statements take these core values and try to imagine a preferred future for the state and all of its people, with an aspirational set of vision statements that motivate people to come together and to take action. These are some of the key questions we ask with our vision statements. What is the California that embodies our core values to the fullest? What should California be full of? Or maybe the opposite, what should California be free of? What is the California we want? That's what our vision is about. After that, we come up with breakthrough solutions. These are provocative, intriguing ideas that reveal the limitations of our current system and point the way towards the need to build new, much better systems that are grounded in our core values and in our commitments. Some of the key questions are, what can provoke us? What can push us out of our comfort zone to deepen the conversations we need to have and to expand our imagination for more ambitious action? And then finally, we offer a set of pivotal moves. These offer strategic approaches to the problem. The focus is not on what we do, but more on how we do it. Although we do offer plenty of illustrative solutions that people might want to consider. And the key question here in all of this is, how do we build a much better system that can serve all of California and all Californians now and into the long-term future? Thousands of Californians have improved and informed this work and this roadmap. We invite you to check it out in more depth. Go to vision.california100.org. Now let's hear from some of our directors about their work over these past few years.
California 100 is an exciting project that's been looking at the future of California. I'm going to talk today a little bit about meta themes, things that we've learned that are sort of big lessons about how to do this kind of project. But then I want to go on and talk about specific themes about California, and specifically successes and failures, or at least problems that we have to deal with in the future. The meta themes have to do with the fact that we tried something new and different. We wanted to see if various researchers around the state could actually think about the future. Now you might say, well, everybody thinks about the future, but the truth is academics tend to focus on the past. They tend to look at what has happened in the past and use that to try to understand what's happened. They sometimes make projections into the future. They don't think a lot about the future. So our whole project involved commissioning a whole bunch of different groups around the state. We commissioned 30 different reports from them, paired, so each group of people working for us did 2 reports. One was on what we call facts, origins, trends. The other one was on future scenarios. And it was that second one that really pushed people to think harder. We wanted them to do the first report. We wanted them to understand what the facts and the origins and the trends were of where we were in California in areas like housing and transportation and so forth. But we also wanted them to think seriously about the future. We learned that they could do that. And specifically, they could think about what we call critical uncertainties, which are dimensions that are really important for the future, for which we don't quite know how it's going to work out, but that will have fundamental implications for what happens in the state of California. So some of these dimensions are things like, not surprisingly, the future of the economy. Another set of things are attitudes towards various groups in the state. Those are the critical uncertainties. What's going to happen in those areas, and how is that going to affect the state of California? But let's get on to the specific themes of what we learned about California. California has some of the highest rates of income inequality, with the rich having a larger share of the total income of the state than everybody else, and that's much larger than almost any other state. So it's a state that's very rich, but it's also got tremendous extremes of wealth and poverty. Housing is the most expensive of anywhere in the country. It's about 2.5 times the cost of the average house in the United States. No other state gets close to our very high cost of housing, and that's especially true in areas like the Bay Area, but it's true throughout the state as well. So as a result, people can't afford housing, and we have a low rate of home ownership. That's not good for California, and in fact, one of the symptoms is rampant homelessness. Climate change is going to cause all sorts of problems: coastal flooding, wildfires, temperature change, as I've mentioned. This is going to change what it means to live in California, and we have to find ways to deal with those problems. It probably means more air conditioning for people. It certainly means we've got to learn to manage the forests so we don't have out-of-control wildfires. So those are just some of the problems we face. But let's not end there. Let's talk about our successes. California has been tremendously successful, as I said, as an economy. It's the most dynamic, innovative economy, arguably in the world. It's a leader in dealing with renewables and trying to deal with carbon emissions. We've got laws in place and plans in place to really try to grapple with that in a way that almost no other state is doing. We've been a leader in implementing Obamacare in covered California, which has really extended coverage dramatically to all sorts of groups. And by the way, has also reduced the growth in the rate of costs for healthcare. So that's a double win and a very impressive record for covered California. We've been a leader in reforming our criminal justice system. We used to have one of the highest incarceration rates of any state, in fact, any nation in the world, and we've really reduced that. And we've done that without, as far as the research shows, really increasing crime. So that's a miraculous and extraordinary result. And it shows that we can avoid the incarceration of people, which harms the people, obviously, but also harms communities to which they return. So as a result, we've made real dramatic strides in that area. And finally, we've been a land of inclusion with respect to immigrants, with communities of color, LGBTQ populations. California's led the way for the country in providing inclusive and equitable kinds of approaches to helping those groups. So California has not been without its extraordinary successes, and those successes show us that we can actually solve problems. And because we can actually solve problems, even though we have the challenges that I've mentioned, housing, workforce, climate change, governance, we can deal with those problems. We can solve those problems because California has shown again and again that it's a state that can really get things done.
So throughout California 100, we wanted to make sure that engagement was a key part of our work. And so it wasn't just about doing research or innovation projects or doing exercises in advanced technology. We wanted to really make sure that we lifted up and centered BIPOC, queer, and other communities in the conversations that we had. So some of the partnerships that we enacted early on were with the Wakanda Dream Lab to do a youth visioning exercise for the future. We worked with Activate California, Equality California, the Latino Community Foundation, and CHIDLA to make sure that we brought in immigrant voices into these conversations. Our goal really is, with this initiative, was to make sure that when we talk about the future of California, that we include every community that is impacted by those conversations, because we know too often they're not. And so the engagement team has worked hand in hand with other directors in California 100. We made sure that our deliverables, our products, our research reports, our innovation projects were communicated to the public at large. We've engaged different audiences throughout that work. We've talked to youth and young people and young organizers. We've talked to elected officials and key policy staff in Sacramento. And we've worked, as I noted earlier, with organizations who do advocacy work, who do work on ensuring that communities of color are included in different conversations in Sacramento. So through our engagement activities, what we really tried to do was make sure that every single piece of California 100, whether it was research, whether it was innovation, whether it was advanced technology and more, that included actual community voices in the conversations.
Californians have an incredible capacity for innovation, and there are countless sources for new and exciting ideas that can advance the state in the coming century. In this spirit, California 100 and UC Berkeley's Possibility Lab partnered to support a set of demonstration projects at both the state and local levels. These projects focused on designing and rigorously testing big ideas that have the potential to advance California. And what we've learned from these projects has been transformational. Together with our public sector and community partners, we've made California the first government in the world to track microplastics in our drinking water. We've designed and tested new models for participatory research that center the voices of everyday Californians in policy. And we've created new ways to strengthen the social safety net so we can reach every Californian who's eligible for state programs and services. Our work was about supercharging innovation in our state. And over the last 2 years, we've done that and more. We've engaged directly with state and local leaders to workshop best practices and implement changes with long-term impact. And we believe our innovation projects can serve as models for replication and scale-up well into the future. We're proud of this work, and even prouder to continue supporting our partners with innovation and implementation in the years ahead. I think the California 100 initiative will be remembered for putting research into action. I think building the muscle for innovation means building relationships and infrastructure, and California 100 has helped the state take giant leaps forward in doing that work. We've partnered with community organizations and helped them understand how to use their own data, how to collect new data, and how to make data-driven decisions. And we've partnered with government agencies to help them think about how to try new things and new ways of meeting their core missions. So ultimately, I think the work that we've done will be remembered not just for the research reports we've produced, but for the meaningful change that we've catalyzed across the state.
I'm Allison Burke. I'm the Director of Advanced Technology for California 100. One area of development that we've focused on within advanced technology is being able to replicate the success of Silicon Valley in areas of California that need that dynamism and that have young people with STEM backgrounds, STEM majors, and technology skills who want to get into the technology industry to help drive California forward.
There isn't really a coalition to think about the future, right? There's a coalition to think about the today. And shifting the conversation and creating space to think about what's right over a century or even over decades from now helps to just change the conversation in a way that I think narratively is important and also allows us to think about what are the investments we can make today, what are the investments we can make over the next 5 or 10 years that actually will pay off for Californians over the long term.
I think California 100 has had a transformative impact on how we really view the future of California. There's really not a lot of long-term policy planning that happens out of Sacramento, and particularly at the county and local levels. But as the fourth biggest economy in the world, where California goes, so goes the nation. And so California 100 has really led the way on making sure that we are prepared for California's future, and we are in the best positions to make sure that future generation of Californians have a future they can prosper and thrive in.
What's unique is actually there is very few organizations or agencies that took that far ahead, 30, 50, 100 years from now. Oftentimes, it's not tangible to a lot of people. But this is what makes it unique. It's really looking into the future and looking at the policy areas that we need to tackle and nobody is tackling. So it is unique from that perspective.
Where so many of us are stuck in thinking about the crisis of the moment, or at least the short-term crises we're facing. There was a group of people and an institution that came together to say, look, it doesn't have to be this way. That no matter how dire the situation may get, we have a choice if we decide to make it. And so I think that is a very important point to make in terms of the legacy of California 100 is it is, among other things, the initiative that allowed Californians to feel like they still have a choice.
I think one really unique aspect of California 100 has been bringing together so many considerations about the future. So we're not just thinking about education or the environment or the economy, but really looking at all of those pieces together, and that is a really unique opportunity to have a united and integrated conversation.
California 100 has raised the voices of a great cross-section of the states in discussing the future. Normally this is left to people that look like me, and I think the great news is I'm the minority in this room and conversation, and young people especially, but all sorts of folk from all walks of life have been able to contribute to the products that California 100 has generated.
Future envisioning is important because you can't build something you can't envision. And if we are to think about what the future holds, envisioning what that looks like and working towards that goal backward from where we are at currently. It's a tension of what we know and what we anticipate and what can happen. So that's very exciting stuff. It's been a really wonderful and at times overwhelming experience, but definitely something that is worthwhile and necessary. This exercise matters to me because as an advocate and long-term advocate for marginalized communities, I've often felt we're functioning on the defense, reacting to issues that are happening to us in our daily lives. Being able to take a step back and think about how to take the offense, how to prepare ourselves, and how to put ourselves in the place where we can be active determinants of our future is incredibly important, rather than reacting to things happening to us.
The visioning work that was taking place, it's a game changer. Again, I had to go back to just the folks that I work with consistently, and it's like, either if I'm going to a juvenile detention facility, working with folks who have coming home after doing a decade or 2 decades of incarceration, or community members who are just stuck on the grind, working 2 to 3 jobs a day. And doing it with them has offered not just an opportunity to tap into that creative and imagination that they had as a child and apply it into not just their own life, but again, California, the future of California, and also the community. And it has, and I continue to say it has the potential, if we do it large scale, incorporate into an education system, to have a tremendous impact of how California deals with its future, and not just solely on its present, because it's in, and I know most of the time we get caught up with the practicality of things, but this one here, it allows people to just escape the moment and hardship of their reality and really think of like the possibility of for my family, our community, and the future of California.
Typically, Californians are, they just follow the headlines, they follow immediate issues, they follow whatever the the top priorities are of the parties or particular political figures. But the problem is that politicians, political figures, news media will often seize upon very short-term issues, very isolated issues, when what California needs to solve a lot of the bigger problems across the state is to have some outside-of-the-box thinking, to consider issues that are maybe not politically all that palatable right now to talk about, or issues that are risky to talk about. And I think it's important to be able to break from just the status quo and try to reframe conversations that are more productive and substantive rather than whatever's politically popular. A lot of the things that we take for granted were victories that were achieved long ago that required people to think long term and think into the future. And that's what we need. That's what we need to solve a lot of the problems that we have now. We're not going to solve, for example, a problem like homelessness if we don't think about what we need to do now to get ahead of the problem in the future.
It's important because it makes people take some time to think about longer-term futures and our obligation to future generations. It makes us get out of the day-to-day battles over policy and the nitty-gritty of particular practices and think about the big trends that we're facing. And again, what is our obligation to future generations? How do we make that commitment to them and set our state on a course for success, equity, inclusion, innovation? It's enabled Californians to think like Californians, to be big, bold, visionary. This is important. California became California because we were willing to look ahead, far ahead, and have huge aspirations about what this state could be. We imagined a future that no one had ever created before, and we just did it. We've lost that drive in California, and we need to be able to bring it back. And so visioning and future scenarios takes us back to our heritage as Californians, who are transformative, who are innovative, who are bold.
Just the ability to put these in tension with each other, I think is going to be very helpful in getting us out of the rut that we are finding ourselves, not just on this particular issue, but some of the most intractable issues that's hounding American society and California as a state at the moment.
It also has brought together this really great group of people that are diverse and have different perspectives and a different kind of mechanism of action from across the state to look across different sectors, right? Not just, focused on innovative financing within the human services space like I do, but, folks that are thinking about housing, that are thinking about energy, that are thinking about the workforce, that are thinking about, things that I would never bring to bear on a day-to-day basis and trying to find areas of collaboration, areas of compromise, and, create a long-term pathway to some of those areas of compromise.
I think it's important to give us an opportunity to think boldly about where we want to go. And I think often we get stuck in taking small incremental steps, and often that's the reality of what we have to do. But if we know what we're working towards, we can start taking those steps in a way that's working towards a different kind of a future for the state of California.
Well, you don't want to make policy in a constantly reactive mode. Ideally, you want to get ahead of the crises that we face, and in a really ideal world, make the world better and sow the seeds, lay the groundwork for fundamentally progressive change before the need becomes really acute. I think law in particular is struggles as a field to get to that because it's so sort of inherently conservative. So much of what law is about is kind of making arguments for doing the same things that we've done before based on the authorities that existed in the past. And that's, I think, why visioning is important everywhere, but it's particularly important and really very much needed in legal spaces.
In policymaking, it's easy to be incrementalist, to do the next one step or two steps. But if we want to transform our state, we need to think differently. We need to start from 100 years from now, work backwards, and completely challenge everything that we do today. Think differently about how we get to a different future. California 100 is so unique for the way it engages young people. It has such an emphasis in thinking long term. It's putting front and center the very people who will be around 100 years from now, experiencing the changes that we start making today.
I think futures visioning is extremely critical. Frankly, we don't do enough of it in policymaking or in government. I think especially as we're doing this work, right, post-pandemic, and after we just experienced what happened with COVID-19, I think everyone's began to think a little bit more about the importance of futures planning and futures visioning, right? We didn't know that we were going to be entering into a pandemic, and there was clearly more that we could have done on the policy end, and frankly, more that government could have done to prepare for such an extreme event to happen, and frankly, we weren't prepared. And so many of us now are having conversations about what we can do to better prepare, not just for a situation like COVID, but for the climate crisis. And those are the kind of hard conversations we need to have right now so that when we do have catastrophic events happen, we are better prepared to respond to them.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Karthik Ramakrishnan, Executive Director of California 100. It's been an incredible journey to do this work, and we can't wait to continue this journey with you as we have deep conversations and, importantly, commit to taking bold actions to set our state on a much better future.